I'm Gary Stern with the Journal News of Lowhud. I'm engagement editor and a member of the editorial board. Thanks for being here tonight. We're going to, as you know, I think we're going to have the candidates for county executive up first at 7 o'clock, which is now. We'll go for about an hour, take a short break, and then have the candidates for Ramapo supervisor. All right, so this is going to be really brief. We're going to get right to it. Running the show tonight is going to be my colleague, Nancy Cutler. You probably know her from social media. Nancy Rockland, yes, she is. And our colleague, Swapna Venugopal, is sitting right there, and she's going to be tracking the candidates, the amount of time they have left. She's going to tell them when they have 20 seconds to go, and when they're out of time, she's going to... We got a very old school bell, which I like myself. If you care, the Yankees are winning 2-0 at the bottom of the fifth. And finally, President Baston is going to say a couple of words, and then we're going to get going.
Welcome to Rockland Community College, and I'm so happy to see each and every one of you tonight. It is very important to this college that our doors be open to make sure that this community has the support that it needs. Franklin Roosevelt once said these words, "Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power over us. The ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president and senators and congressmen and government officials, but the voters of this country." Tonight, these doors are open for the voters of this community to hear from those who seek to represent them. We are pleased to be this house in which you come tonight, and we are grateful to partner with Journal News. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We hope this discussion will enlighten voters and engage Rocklanders in their community. We've explained the basic format tonight to the candidates already, so now we're going to share it with you. Each candidate gets a minute introduction and another minute closing statement. Questions go to specific candidates who will get 2 minutes to respond. Responses are then invited by the other candidate, and those will be a minute long. We discourage crosstalk from the candidates. This is a controlled discussion. If we perceive a need for another round of response, we'll give it. There's a lot to get through in a short period, so we strive for decorum and speed. That said, we appreciate our audience and admire enthusiasm, but we hope there will be minimal interruptions, again, so we can get to as many topics as possible. The best way to support your candidate is to give that person the time to shine with answers. So try to hold your applause to the end and let the candidates respond. Now, we're going to start with our candidates for Rockland County Executive. We have Republican incumbent Ed Day, who is also running on the Reform Party line, and Democratic challenger Maureen Porrette, who is also on the ballot on the Working Families and Women's Equality lines. Mr. Thomas Sullivan is running on the Conservative line. Our debates, though, focus on major party candidates. So let's start with a 1-minute introduction. We defer to the incumbent to go first. County Executive.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Baston for his sage words and also for lending RCC to us this evening, and thank Lowhud, the Journal News, Gary and Nancy and others for bringing this to us tonight. I want to thank all of you for being here, because this is a participatory democracy. It's important that you are part of it. I've come here 4 years ago from our community. My community background is a Civic Association president, very deeply involved in the schools, PTA Life Award winner, also coaching our young people for 20 years. That's my background here in Rockland County. I came to this job as county executive, my first full-time elected official job, first time I did that, 4 years ago, just under 4 years ago. And I brought with me many skills that I honed during my time in the outside world, including many years on law enforcement, where I had command and executive experience, and also executive experience in the private sector. And those skills that I use to make things happen here in Rockland, looking forward to speaking about them and sharing with you this evening. Thank you very much.
Ms. Porrette.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Lowhud and RCC for hosting this forum this evening. and I'm very pleased to finally have the opportunity to debate Mr. Day. I've been waiting to do so for a long time. I was born and raised in the Bronx and moved to Rockland 26 years ago. I set down roots, had my big, beautiful family, and fell in love with Rockland County. I'm a working mother of 8, and my combined 33 years of financial, legal, and administrative experience in the private, public, and not-for-profit sectors make me uniquely qualified for this position. Most of you, like myself, are angry about rampant overdevelopment and corruption in local government, and I want to make one thing clear to each of you. You have every right to be. However, there are right and wrong ways to handle these issues. Further, I have not accepted a single dime from corporations or any special interest groups seeking favors from county government. I hope throughout the course of this debate to convince you that I am the right woman for this job. Thank you.
Let's start with you. You've pushed to sell the same building in downtown New City, which has fallen into disrepair. At the same time, you closed the county's nursing home at Yeager Health Complex in Pomona, but have not moved to sell that building. What does the county need as far as housing building stock, and what should be sold and why?
Well, we cannot sell Building A. Thank you for the question. But Building A, the old Sun Park Nursing Home, is tied into a larger complex. That decision was made very aware to everyone that it was just an impossible task to do. We could lease it, which is what the original situation with the buyer who pulled out was. So we're left with compressing our footprint in county government. We've gone from over 3,000 employees to 1,691 employees. It's incumbent upon us in county government to be a little leaner than have this space, plus the cost of running these buildings. It's a lot of money. We have one buyer who has gone through 2 processes, one conducted by my office at the direction and approval of the county attorney, one conducted by the legislature, and we have a buyer who's ready to bring in senior housing. The buyer is well known. He's done 24 different developments with senior housing. He is offering $510,000 more than the appraised value. By putting that back on the tax rolls, the town of Clarkstown and the school district will see an additional $400,000 to $500,000 of annual revenue. This has been characterized as a no-brainer, and I agree. Where it is now, it is with the legislature, properly so, because at the end of the day, the legislature is charged with surplusing property and actually selling it. This has been around since October 1st, 2015. The administration has answered every question that could legitimately have been raised, and I would just simply point out that nearly hardly any questions were asked when the Bank of New York building was sold next door in 2012. But we still have comported with the request of the legislature, and we asked them very simply. We are just coming at a deficit. We're doing very well, but we are in deficit. We also have demands that are becoming part of the union contracts that we're putting together. So I've asked them very simply, look, the reality is we do not need the space. It is not a place to be working in. It is in horrible condition. We don't need it. We have a beautiful complex in Pomona that we're repurposing, and I just very simply said to them, please, let's move the sale forward.
Ms. Perez, your thoughts on the same building and Building A at Yeager?
1 minute?
Yes.
We all know that the same building should be sold. And the reason the same building hasn't been sold is twofold. When Mr. Day first wanted to sell the building, he failed to put through the proper resolution through the legislature to move it to surplus. He then waited another 15 months to do so, and now is in a deadlock with the legislature, which is a shame. If I get into office with a Democratic majority legislature, I will make sure that that building gets sold. As for Summit Hospital, that caused the loss of 432 jobs to people in this county, and now that it is empty and no longer operating, that $32 million asset is on our books at 0. So we can't sell a building that's worth nothing, and that's one of the things that Mr. Day has done for our county.
Ms. Perez, can you explain how you plan to reduce the burden of so many tax-exempt properties in Rockland that we keep hearing about?
Sure. You know, one of the things that's been happening on a local basis long before Mr. Day came into office is a fallacy or belief that this can actually be handled only on the county level. It cannot. There was a religious law that was passed in 2000 by President Clinton prior to him becoming president, during his presidency, wherein it allows for the purchase of religious land use. So if you are buying property here in this county for religious land use under this federal law, There is nothing that a county legislature or executive can do about it. What we can do is start the process of dealing with our U.S. congressmen and senators to bring the argument, and if need be, bring a legal suit to say, how do we balance the fiscal interest of a municipality versus religious freedom? How can we allow religious freedom, which I am all for, to overweigh and overtake a municipality's fiscal status? That can't happen. Another thing that can happen on the state level is we can seek to put through proper resolutions through our legislature to move under Article 9 of the Constitution of New York State to have the state legislature allow for partial taxes to be assessed against these tax-exempt properties. And those taxes can be assessed for fire, police, and emergency services. This is something that has never been done before. It is something that's never been on the table. And while zoning codes are an important part of county legislatures, they do not stop what we are dealing with here in this county. And building codes, while extraordinarily important to the safety of residents, firefighters, and police officers, do not stop home development.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
What about these plans?
Well, first of all, our looper has been discussed many times at the federal level, and it's not going to move forward. And many people like Dovis have urged the federal officials to make amendments to it. The reality is also that this dialogue about tax-exempt property has been going on for years. The fact of the matter is, as my opponent just said, yes, the decision is at the state level as to how that works, and it's applied by the town. So it's something determined very, very long ago when I first came into office. What I find interesting is the whole notion of now taxing tax-exempt properties. Does that mean we're looking to tax Salvation Army, Camp Venture, ARC of Rockland, People of People? These are tax-exempt properties. Catholic Church, for example, tax-exempt property. Yes, maybe we should focus on residences, but when I look at the plans laid up by my opponent, which is very broad-based without making any differential between the two, I would be concerned when we're looking to tax people, organizations that are feeding the hungry, that are dealing with folks with special needs. I think that may be a bit much.
Okay, the county's 2018 spending plan was just unveiled, and the legislature is now looking at it. Ms. Porret, what are your thoughts on the budget proposal? Is it fair? Good plan?
I think it's extraordinarily fair because it's an election year. And what I found really interesting about it is that for the past 4 years while my opponent has been in office, he has consistently cut the funding to the not-for-profits he just said he was very concerned about for tax-exempt purposes. Meanwhile, this year, he put $20.7 million in the budget. Now remember, this is unallocated. It has not been allocated to any one of these not-for-profits, so that's a number that was just placed into the budget. This year alone, in January of 2017, in order to effectuate a forced sale of the same building because he can't negotiate with the legislature, our county executive cut all of our not-for-profits to zero. The not-for-profits that employ 9,000 people, the not-for-profits that bring in hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, the not-for-profits who stand for battered women, hungry children, people with mental health issues. I wish he had been that concerned about it for the 4 years that he was in office. When I get into office, our not-for-profits will never be cut to zero.
Mr. Day?
No, certainly. First of all, this is not because of its election year. I mean, that's kind of silly, frankly. What my opponent doesn't understand is the New York State Controller said there are certain ways you do things, number one, and you have to have procurement policy and things of that nature and contracts. The other piece of it is that they asked a simple question. We have non-mandated services. That's how a not-for-profits would describe as non-mandated services. How do you give money to a non-mandated service when you are in deficit? So we dealt with that, and yes, did they get in between the situation between myself and the legislature? Absolutely. Was that tough to handle? Absolutely. There's no question about it, but there's a right way of doing things and a wrong way of doing things. And we're doing it the right way now. We have migrated and moved these agencies over to contracts. These are not unallocated. And they will be getting funds, and they no longer will be a non-mandated service. They are a contractual obligation, which is consistency. And I'm proud of the fact that we've gone from $16 million a year, which, by the way, was every year until this year, to 21.3. So the notion of cuts is absurd.
The county's deficit, once around $130 million, is now down to less than $15 million. The county's bond rating was once just a step above junk status. It too has improved. Ms. Perrette, isn't this good news for Rockland, and can you talk about what we should do next?
It's actually wonderful news, but what everyone needs to know is the truth. Mr. Day has been taking credit for the reduction of this deficit for the past 4 years, and it is a blatant lie. On November 13th of 2013, our legislature passed through a municipal deficit reduction bond. Mr. Day had just been elected the county executive. That municipal deficit reduction bond for $96 million was voted against by Mr. Day while he was a legislator. When that went to market in March of 2014, it came in at a premium of $12 million. That $96 million bond plus the $12 million premium lowered the deficit for the county from $138 million to $30 million. Prior to being able to secure that bond, however, the legislature put a resolution on the table stating that they would pay down $10 million a year towards our deficit. So in 2014, another $10 million came in, and that brought us down to $20. After we received that bond and realized we had to pay $13 million a year to pay off the bond, which raised our debt, by the way, to $360 million, we now have paid $4 and $4 million in 15, 16, and 17. And that has reduced our deficit to, like we said, about $10 million. All of that was done by the legislature. And it is great news, but I wish that we could get the facts from politicians who are in office.
Mr. Day?
Anybody here who believes the county legislature did all this work, I have a bridge to sell you. That's just a reality. The reality is the administration did move all these things forward, and the numbers are almost fantastic at this point. $138 million deficit, now down to nearly single digits. It was the work of my administration and the people who are running it who made this happen. We reduced the size of the budget. The budget I proposed to 2009 levels this year. That's not a legislative act. That's the administration taking ownership of the situation that we were facing. We were near crisis. We didn't get there from that day. We got there because of my opponent's allies in the legislature not paying attention, double-digit tax increases. At the same time, the deficit was skyrocketing. We were in crisis mode. We were in near bankruptcy. We have turned that around. Everybody understands it except my opponent. And we can have fantasy time all we want here, but that's the reality of it all. We are healthier and stronger, and that is a fact.
All Rockland-wide elections, and this one too, involve a lot of talk about the block vote and the growing Orthodox community. Mr. Day, what is the block vote, and is there a problem with it?
The block vote, as I understand it, comes from an area in Ramapo which is ultra-religious. That's, as I understand, it's always been described to me. Is there a problem with it? No, there's not a problem because people is America and people are supposed to vote. So I don't see a problem with that. What I would like to see is everybody being engaged. We have 190,000 voters here in Rockland County. We have soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine who gave their lives and served this country for the right for all of you to vote. And what I would say to all of you is this. Think of the sacrifice that went into that right to vote. Look at in Iran, the first time they voted with the little purple on their fingers. How proud they were to have voted. It's a special gift that we have that we should utilize more often. And as far as who's casting the vote, the reality is it's an American way of life. We have many, many people who are allowed to vote, and I would encourage everybody to vote. And the fact that you're all here tonight is heartening because it shows there's an interest and an engagement that makes you good voters. Thank you.
Ms. Perrette?
We live in America, last time I looked, and every single one of us has the right to vote regardless of religion, race, creed, or identity. And I find it extraordinarily disingenuous that our county executive would sit here tonight with everything that's been published in the papers over the past 4 years about him screaming about the Ramapo 5 and the block vote and the carrying on even during these primaries about election fraud. If those people who registered to vote were from any other town but Ramapo, he would have never said a word about it. It's disingenuous. It's one of the tremendous problems that we're having in this county with divisiveness. And going back to the numbers, we're gonna foil the legislative minutes and your votes, and I'm going to put out there that you are lying to the people about the municipal deficit. You have an opportunity here to be clear. Yes, it's good news. You had nothing to do with it.
Short response.
Yeah, short response is, first of all, somebody can find any time I've ever written block vote anywhere, I would welcome to see it, number one. Number two, I actually reached out to my opponent's campaign team and requested that take a look at the information we had in regards to our allegations of voter fraud, which has been identified by law enforcement personnel, has been sent to the Board of Elections, has been sent to all three prosecutors, local, state, and federal, to have them look at this. These are clear-cut cases where the people who are being registered, we don't know if they exist. And this is why we asked for an investigation. But I did ask the campaign to come and take a look at it, take a look at what's going on here. Because the compromising of our electoral process compromises all of our lives.
We're going to do a minute, and then we'll see where we need to go from there.
The good thing about the election process is you have a Democratic leader and you have a Republican leader in the Board of Elections. And the two women that sit in these seats are duty-bound, under the law, to report to the Board of Elections in Albany any and all findings of voter fraud. I don't think either one of these women, the Republican or the Democratic chair, are going to put their necks on the line for 900 votes. And again, we haven't seen any proof of voter fraud. The election spoke, the people spoke, and that's where this stands. And I'm gonna say it again. If this was any other town or neighborhood, we would have never heard about the voter fraud allegations that he brought up.
Mr. Day, what do you think of towns wanting to restrict the use of their parks and enact strict sign laws, especially after concerns about expanding arrows or boundaries used by religious Jews during the Sabbath? Do you envision such restrictions for the county?
No, I do not. First of all, as far as restricting use of parks, towns and municipalities have a right to do so. That's just the law. And the only way that they cannot, as I understand it, if there's federal dollars taken, so then there cannot be a restriction to the town local parks. As far as passing any kind of legislation after the fact, it would never stand legal muster. It would be a fool's errand to do that. The fact of the matter is laws that are passed and they are violated later on is one thing, but passing laws in response to things is fraught with legal issues. So as far as the Rockland County is concerned, I know of no legislation being considered by the county legislature at all along these lines. As far as what towns and villages do, that's their own level of government, and they make the decisions based upon the law.
Ms. Cora, what is your position on parks, residency restrictions, and sign laws?
I agree with Mr. Day on that. I don't think that we would get involved in anything like that. I think the sign laws and the e-roofs, I think people have a misunderstanding of what's happening. I think you can't have it both ways, and I think Mr. Day would agree with me on that. We can have it both ways that, for the majority of people, we can't post on county property or town property signage and things along those lines. But the e-roofs really require posting of God, what is that white? PVC piping. PVC piping in order to run the lines that allow the people in the religious community to move around on the Sabbath. And I think there really does need to be something in terms of fairness, that if that is going to be allowed for the religious community, which it should be, because they should be able to push their carriages on the Sabbath. You know, I think we should maybe consider expanding whether or not signage from other groups should be able to be put up as well.
The State Department of State continues its probe into resident accusations of blockbusting and inappropriate real estate solicitation in the county. There was a meeting last September at this campus hosted at the Cultural Arts Center where testimony was taken. Mr. Day, what do you think is going on in the real estate market in Rockland?
Well, you know, look, there's clearly similarities to what we saw in Queens back in the 70s and 80s. Attempts by folks to almost bully people at times, go into their homes, trying to get them to sell their house. There's been documented, it's been filmed, so it's not something that anybody's going to say is not occurring. I think people have a right to quiet enjoyment of their homes, which, again, some of the local laws that have been passed to prevent, knocking on doors for real estate agents. There's a reason for that, and I think that people are, the local municipalities are responding to the concerns of their constituents. But I know the realtors have expressed concerns to me about this, and I welcome the Department of State's investigation and see what they actually do find out, because there's two sides to every observation. And again, certainly there's film of people who have been in situations where they're being pushed around at their own house. There are some realtors who insist that's not the case. So, look, there's an investigation going on by the Department of State. I certainly look forward to seeing what they're going to come up with. And at that point, we'll have to approach it accordingly. That would be coming from the county legislature and the enactment of any kind of appropriate legislation.
Ms. Pora, what do you think is going on in the real estate market?
I agree 100% with Mr. Day on this one. I think people absolutely deserve quiet enjoyment of their homes. I couldn't agree any more on that. And listen, if we all want to sell our homes, we know where to find our local realtors. So the fact that people are, knocking on your doors, and like Mr. Day said, really bullying people around, I agree with him 100%. I stand against that as well.
Rockland has not been immune to the opioid epidemic. Ms. Poret, can you explain how you would help the county navigate through this crisis?
As a former prosecutor and currently as a defense attorney that deals mostly with people under 25, also in family and friends that I've known throughout the years, I have suffered through and with people with opioid problems. And while I appreciate the county jumping onto the bandwagon of the national lawsuit, I don't see where that's going to help any people who are dealing with opioid crisis here in our county. We have no funding to deal with this. Some of the organizations at the non-profit level do deal with this. And I think one of the things as a county we need to do is understand that the underlying problem with opioid or any other drug use is a mental health problem. And it needs to be dealt with differently. It needs to be dealt with in the criminal justice system differently, which DA Zugabe has done a fabulous job of doing. And I think that we need to be able to figure out ways. We have a lot of space in Pomona now, where hopefully, I can sit down and look at the budget and find a way to deal with that underlying issue, which is mental illness. Most people who are into heavy-duty drugs are self-medicating. They are not on the proper prescriptions. They're screaming out for help. And I had 2 dear friends in the past year lose their 20-something-year-old children in this county. So it's a disgrace. I think we all need to open our minds a little more. These are not criminals. These are sick people. And we, as a county, need to help the not-for-profits deal with this.
Mr. Day?
Yeah, Ms. Perez is quite, I certainly feel for her. I've lost one of my kids who I coached the same way. But what troubles me is that the assertion that she's made on her website that Rockland County spends not a dime towards this. The fact of the matter is the state does spend $2.5 million, not the amount she put down on her website. The county spends $1.1 million annually, and it goes to many of the organizations that she spoke of should be getting it. VCS, Mental Health Association, Candle, Pecor Shalom. These organizations do get the funding to fight this. And also, I know when Ms. Perret first announced, she spoke about not paying much attention for 27 years, which would explain why she's not aware of the fact that we've already had helping Rockland County's at-risk youth with the Rockland County Partnership for Safe Youth. This is a collaboration between DA Zugabe, BOCES, 4 or 5 county departments, and my office. Also, we have employment interface to find jobs with the Rockland County Career Center. So Rockland County is doing a lot in this area.
Ms. Perret, would you like to respond to that?
$1.1 million to the not-for-profits is $1.1 million to the not-for-profits. That is not the county stepping up in Pomona and seeing if there's anything that we can do. I love May 3rd was when I stepped up to announce my run, and it was my first television interview. And the young reporter who's actually here tonight asked me the question about why I stepped up to run, and what I said is, I stepped up to run because of national politics. But that doesn't mean that I don't know about local politics. What I said is I have never engaged or really paid attention to what was going on with politicians because I was too busy working here in the county as a prosecutor, a principal law clerk, a defense attorney, and working with our not-for-profits for the past 25 years. I didn't think I had to worry about what our politicians were doing because I know I was doing my job. And when I realized they weren't, that's why I stepped up.
Mr. Day, you wanted to...
Yeah, one correction. First of all, I never said 1.1 million to the not-for-profits. I said 1.1 million was being spent. Part of that does go for not-for-profits, not all of it. And the fact of the matter is we just secured a $4 million grant. $4 million grant in Rockland County to be spent to help in this crisis. So there are active things being done to address this terrible scourge that's affected everybody, many people in this room, including the two candidates.
I wanted to go back to the question we had previously about the real estate investigation with the State Department of State. At the same time, this organization, this level of state government, has sent 2 monitors to the town of Ramapo, which is sitting in, and the village of Spring Valley, on building codes. And I wanted Mr. Day to talk about some of the issues that he has been talking about for the last year with building code enforcement, and talk about fairness to town level home rule, and how the county balances home rule when it comes to these kinds of enforcements.
Absolutely. I'm happy to answer that question. We balance home rule very carefully. The fact of the matter is Rockland County government has really never been engaged or involved in many of the issues that are out there, slumlord housing, overdevelopment. County government's been absent completely because typically the general thought was that county government can't do anything. I was told that when I ran. The fact is county government can do things, and we do. What we are doing now is working collectively and collaboratively with town governments. I see Supervisor Monahan is here. We work with the building and codes inspectors, but sadly, we have one town that by and large just does not get it. They allow development that compromises our environment, compromises neighborhoods, and there is no check and balance. This is well known in every area of planning that this is going on. And it's just really a sad commentary, because at the end of the day, the people suffer, the neighborhoods are compromised. So we developed an approach that utilized the sanitary code to address housing violations. We're having tremendous effect on slumlords. We're turning bad housing into good housing, slumlords to landlords. As far as development is concerned, we are going after developers who are looking to destroy the environment and destroy communities. It's something that people are demanding. It's something we're happy to comport with. And as far as the state monitors are concerned, as we all know, we had a recent situation where the state monitor, Ms. Krieger, actually approved a PVC fire hydrant, a plastic fire hydrant, they used to protect the school of 400 little girls. Think about that for a second. Think about that. This is not about anything more than the safety of those children. And the fact of the matter is this monitor was not monitoring. That is exactly what's going on. So I'm not really happy about it. I'm not happy about the way the town of Ramapo has handled this. I'm heartened when I see Councilman Withers actually criticize what's going on there. I just wish he stayed there a little longer. But at the end of the day, the County of Rockland is doing things above and beyond the call of duty in service to this county and community.
Mr. President, we could talk about the balance of home rule for towns and villages, control their zoning, and the county's role.
The general municipal law, specifically 239, discusses home rule. And there are about 5 different circumstances wherein the county can step in. Other than that, towns and villages oversee what happens in their towns. And I have to applaud Mr. Day and Mike Cohut and some of the other supervisors in towns and villages. Building code enforcement is crucial to life-saving. Building code enforcement, as I stated earlier, makes sure that people are safe in their homes, that slumlords are not putting up particle board walls or having insulation hanging out of ceilings, that there's running water for babies in households. But let's be clear, those are not zoning codes, and they do not have anything to do with overdevelopment. So again, I applaud Mr. Day on that. I think it is imperative, and it is something that I would stand behind and agree with 1,000%. I think that we all as citizens need to understand the difference between where the county has say and where the towns have say. And Mr. Day put through an executive order in May that was completely, I don't want to say illegal, but ineffective, unenforceable, because the county executive does not have authority to overrule state law unilaterally. In order to make a change to the home rule under General Municipal Law 239, you need to file, through Article 9 of the New York State Constitution, a resolution with your own legislature that can either be passed by majority and the county executive or 2/3 quorum. Then that goes to the state. And in this case, do I think that we have an argument to change home rule to the county? We sure do. We sure do. But the only thing that we have going for us right now is thank God we have two good candidates stepping up to take over Ramapo. And maybe we'll have some reprieve from the nonsense and illegality that's gone, on there under St. Lawrence. But again, remember, zoning, building, and federal, all different.
Sure. Mr. Day.
Yes, first of all, my opponent did call my act as illegal. She did, in print and verbally. I took action. Let's just understand the GML. I'm very well aware of the law myself. This is the executive order I put forth. Did not in any way, shape, or form alter the GML. This what I did here, knowing that the GML has no sanction to it. In other words, a town or village can override common sense planning precepts by a supermajority vote. That's what's been going on here. And there's no sanction for them if they do something wrong. Because what they're supposed to do is come back to the county planning department with a rationale as to why are they doing this. You could have one of the worst pieces of development going on, they override it. They're supposed to come back with a rationale why, and they have not. What I did very simply was I said, you know something? I cannot change the GML. I certainly cannot. There's no sanction to the GML, but I am empowered to issue permits. And I said very simply was this: if you're not going to comply with the law, okay, you do what you have to do. But understand something else. I don't have to give permits, and that's where the difference is as far as legality is concerned. And this was authorized by the county attorney.
Please, 1 minute.
Mr. Day said it himself, county executive cannot change the GML. Therefore, if towns and villages have the right to give permits, the county, but for the 5 enumerated circumstances in the GML, where the county can step in and supersede and or provide those permits, we do not have power as county executives unilaterally to change home rule. I would love if we could. I think his intention was fabulous, but you have to follow protocol and know how to pass things through the legislature.
Okay. Since we're sitting in Ramapo, I'm going to ask Mr. Day a question about accusations of rhetoric that people have had and kind of tone that we see a lot on social media, that some people have thought targets a specific community and other people have called anti-Semitism. Can you address how you respond to people saying that about some of the things you said?
Well, first of all, the larger issue here is hate. It's out there. There's no getting around it. There's no ignoring it. It's a fact of life. The positive I can say about it is certainly is not representative of this county and the people within it. There are a few out there who just, for whatever reason, are either ignorant or hateful or combination thereof. And that's what we have to focus on. One of the things that I did, as my administration did, we assembled an interfaith council with the leading members of various religions to address not just incidents of hate, but to celebrate good things that happen, because we need to see that. That's very, very important. Facebook has been a problem, there's no question about it. People have what I call electronic courage. They can put whatever they want down, nobody's going to punch them in the nose. That's just the way it's going to be. And you know, what most responsible elected officials do, myself included, I know others do this, we put filters on to try to minimize some of the comments there, because we cannot monitor these pages all day. And we have some administrators, like I do, who actually will deal with it when it comes up, and we speak out to it as we have to. But Facebook, like many other social media, is a free form of speech. People will debate. I have found when things are said sometimes that are a bit beyond the pale, other people will jump in and respond back. I think that's more effective, because it shows an engagement by the other people out there who will not accept what's being said. But at the end of the day, you're going to see a certain segment of people who are going to do hateful and dumb, stupid things, and that's sadly, that's just the way it is. But I just like to emphasize instead, which is what the Interfaith Council does, says, you know something, here's some good things that happen. And that's what we need to celebrate here in Rockland, because the vast majority of people in this county are good and loving people.
Ms. Perez?
The county executive position, other than our Supreme and County Court judges, is the highest ranking position for whatever ticket you are on. And on September 21st of this year, in the beautiful village of Nyack, the Republican chair, Lawrence Garvey, maybe thought that it fell right along the lines with the Republican Party here in Rockland County, and invited Roger Stone to a fundraiser. If you don't know who Roger Stone is, look him up. He's one of the most misogynistic, sexist, racist, homophobic Republicans. He's been around since the Nixon era. Check him out. We also have a young man running in Clarkstown for one of the wards who consistently, as a Republican candidate, posts the most demeaning, disgusting, anti-Semitic rhetoric. Actually, when I was nominated in June for the Democratic line, I happened to be walking out of my row, and legislator Rita, who I had never met before, was standing behind me and clapping for me. And the next day, Peter Bradley posted on his website a picture of Aaron Reeder clapping behind me, and Mr. Day marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade, calling me a block puppet. I have no interaction with this community. I met that man that night, we said hello. That's how much we've spoken. When you are at the top, when your job is to be the voice for this county, if you are not coming out and overtly denouncing the insidious racism, but specifically anti-Semitism that we've seen in this county over the past 2 years, then you are complicit.
Absolutely. I guess my opponent must have missed the rally in front of the courthouse when we went after, we spoke out against the firebombing or the fireworks that were thrown on the lawn of 2 rabbis in New City. I guess my opponent missed the fact that I was in Nyack in response to the Orlando massacres in support of the lesbian gay community. All those who were clapping there do remember that, I'm sure. Remember that? But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that we do stand up against hate. And I don't know what my picture made the St. Patrick's Day has anything to do with this, but as the top elected official in Rockland County, I do denounce hate. I've done it more than once, and I will continue to do so. So that's the bottom line.
I have worked with VCS for a number of years. Phyllis Frank started Pride in this county in 1999. There has been a Pride event in this county for the past, I can't even think right now, I'm not thinking 18 years. Mr. Day was a legislator for 8 years and has been the county executive for 4. He has never once, ever once showed up to a Pride event. Not once. We have a Pride Sunday in June. It is the major event for Pride. And if you choose to show up to our not-for-profits and our Pride events during election season, that does not mean that you stand by all people in this county. When you put boots on the ground, you do that every single day for the rest of your life. You do that when you're 20, you're 30, you're 40, you're 50, and whether you're running for office or not, it bespeaks who he is.
Mr. Day, you want to do something?
Yeah, well, you know what? To say I was not at any Pride events is absurd. I have been at Pride events. I've been to a number of events for a variety of different things. You know, and if we're gonna pigeonhole this into one issue, I think we're doing everybody here a disservice. The fact of the matter is, everybody who knows me knows I travel to every community. I involve myself in every group, ethnic, religious. That's my background. And people who, you know, are on Facebook, see it. Pictures don't lie. It's right there. I've been doing it every year for years and years and years. I've taught children, coached children rather, of all different backgrounds. So I'm not going to sit here and try to defend myself. I have my own body within my own skin. People know who I am. They know that I'm not anti-Semitic. They know that my actions speak louder than words. So to make this part of some sort of nonsensical political attack really demeans this entire process. Thank you.
We have a new bridge, almost.
We do.
Almost. When it opens next year, we are expected to gain a rapid bus service from Suffern to White Plains, with plans to expand offerings in the future. Is the Lower Hudson Transit Link plan an adequate start, Mr. Day?
I will tell you this, I've been engaged with this process obviously since I came into office. My transportation people and myself have been pushing the state to understand plans are wonderful, but you know something, things take time, and that's the frightening part. They finally did get it. We have a good working relationship with them, but my major concern with the bridge is the toll. The CBC, the Center for Budget Commission, I believe it was from the city, announced that the toll should be like $11. And I said, that's ridiculous. It's not. There's only one other bridge that goes from Rockland to Westchester. What bridge is that, folks? The Bear Mountain Bridge. It's $1.50, okay? Please don't buy into this nonsense about the bridge should be $15 like the George Washington or $10 like the city bridges. The Thruway Authority has been taking 20 or 25% of TZ toll money for years to their operating budget. It's time for them to give back. The Bridge and Thruway Authority, those two authorities can be merged into one. That will save money. The bank settlement funds, not enough was given towards the largest capital project in the state. We need to revisit that. The federal government built a bridge to nowhere in Alaska. Our local elected officials in the federal level of government all voted for it. All paid for. We got a loan for $3.9 billion. That's absurd. This is not the way things should go. The bottom line is that there are plenty of ways to pay for this bridge without raising the tolls, especially to those numbers, because at the end of the day, think about people, and we know the government already has caused market shifts. Does anybody here go to Jersey to buy the gasoline? Government made it more expensive, that's why. It's not any better here in Rockland County, it's more expensive because of government action. If the government takes an action to raise those tolls to those significant double-digit levels, people who come to the Palisades Center Mall, where we get 23% of our sales tax, may choose to make a left turn at that bridge, head down to Rich Hill, or go to Brewster, or go to Putnam County and shop. We have to be very careful of this, so we have to fight this potential toll increase with every sort. I'm used to the bell going off when I was in Catholic school. You know, I'm just going to stop immediately.
Ms. Brett, can you talk about the Lower Hudson Transit Link as a plan? Is that an adequate start for public transportation in Rockland County?
I agree with Mr. Day about, the difficulty of having to deal with the state and trying to get things done. But, there's plenty of things that we can do here in the county, like get a busing system that actually works. We do not have good transportation within or without of this county. And I think, look, we all knew when this bridge was going up that we were going to be dealing with this toll. I agree with Mr. Day. We don't want to be paying $15, but that wasn't the question. The question was about busing and transportation. And throughout the cuts that Mr. Day has made to be more fiscally lean, we have made so many cuts to the staffing at the county level that we can't even get half of our jobs done. Did anyone here know that our transportation administrator is also our planning and development administrator? Two of the biggest jobs here in the county are being handled by one man, who happens to be a wonderful man, but he can't do both jobs. And in July, the MTA handed down grants, New York State grants. There was about $27 million in grants that was allocated. We have 326,000 people in this county. We received a grant for $3.8 million. Orange County has 370,000 people. They received $7.7 million. Why? Because they have a permanent transportation administrator. They have proper grant writers in the office to get the money that we need. We can't do things on such a tight cut staff that we can't get the jobs done. Yes, we're in a lot of trouble in this county fiscally. But Mr. Day said earlier it was because of the Democrats in the legislature. If I recall, from 2006 to 2014, it was Scott Vanderhoff who was in office, who's a Republican. And my opponent was a legislator at that time. And the budget went from, the deficit went from 50 million to 138 million. He was on the legislature too. So, let's keep to facts here.
Mr. Day, please.
We went a bit of C on that question and that answer, but let me put it
You
to you
did
this
with the
way.
polls, too.
Okay, put it to you this way. I am on a street, I run a civic association, I tell people how to prevent a burglary, and I go back to sleep, the next day the house down the block is burglarized. I guess I'm responsible for that? Using that logic is what you're hearing right now. The fact of the matter is, yes, I served as a part-time legislator for 8 years, and I was one of the strongest voices against both Scott Vander Hoff, who is a Republican. I will criticize a Republican when I have to, and also the Democratic majority, who consistently did the same thing. If you want to check my record, you'll find that I voted against almost nearly every budget. You want to check my record, 2008, 2009, I almost called a recession, and nothing was done to soften the blow that came to this county that put us in a free fall. So if we're going to go back to then, that's fine. As it relates to the transportation administrator, we have brought in millions of dollars. We have new trips buses. We have a service for our veterans now. We have 2.6 million rides for our tour, TZS, and trips. And the transportation administrator, my opponent spoke to Commissioner Trent, and he said straight out, I don't need anybody else. We're getting plenty of money
Thank you,
than
Ed.
people we have here.
One quick rebuttal? Quick rebuttal, and then we'll see if we need something else.
I did look at your record. That's how I know everything. And yeah, you voted no. Did you pass any resolutions with solutions?
And they were rejected by the Democratic majority.
Okay.
Does Rockland County need a homeless shelter, Ms.
Yes.
Porret?
Yes. We have one not-for-profit that handles that in this county, Helping Hands. We have 200 to 300 homeless people throughout the course of the year, but in the winter months, sometimes it goes 2,000, 1,500 people. And again, you know what? I don't have the budget in front of me right now. I can't promise what it is that I can do because I have never promised anything on this campaign trail. But I will tell you that I think that is something that the county absolutely needs to undertake. Why? Because these are human beings. And you know what? In the state of our economy, any single one of us could lose our jobs. A house could go on fire. You know, I was looking at the California fires, and what got me more than the people's houses that burned, they said half the people lost where they could work too. So what do we do? What do we do if we fall into that pot someday? It's not them, it's not those, it's us. Yes, we need to do something for the homeless.
Mr. Day?
Yes, I certainly agree with my opponent, there's no question about it, but we do have a homeless shelter for families up in Pomona. We are looking to repurpose the Pomona complex, and within that, we are looking to have a homeless shelter. So these are things that are moving forward with the cooperation of the legislature to help us move that, make that campus our central focal point, county government, and do the things we need to do to get things squared away. We will have that. We also working with, again, besides Helping Hands, we have other potentials we're working on right now to deal with that, deal with the issue of homelessness. And she's absolutely right. Some people are paycheck away from being homeless. There's no question about it. So we have to understand that at the level of our level of government and do what we can do to ensure that there is a safety net for the people of this county.
Okay.
Okay, everyone's favorite debate question. Ms. Porret, what can you say about your opponent that you find admirable?
We're both Irish.
Are you a Yankee fan?
I'm a Mets fan.
What's
And
the
I'm from
score?
the Bronx, and I'm a Met fan. I think Ed and I bring to the table that we're both very tenacious. And I think that we both are strong personalities, and I think that we're both hard workers. And I think that anyone who steps up to do this, as a legislator, as a county executive, anyone who puts themselves into this situation, look, you go in with good intentions. I've never said Mr. Day was a bad man. I would never say that. And maybe in different circumstances, we may actually be friends. I just don't agree with the way that he runs the county, and we have severely different political ideologies. But you know what? He seems like an okay guy.
Thank you.
You better do just as well, Dave.
Same
I-
You
question.
better do just as well.
The one thing I will say about my opponent is she has a passion. And passion's a wonderful thing. There's no question about it. We do look at things differently. I don't look at things politically. That's the difference. I mean, we're getting into this whole Republican-Democratic thing, and it's unfortunate because the reality is we have a majority-minority legislature. There is really a lot of melding that goes on with that, but the reality is that we probably don't see things too differently, probably less so than we think. You know, I admire her for stepping up to the plate, because this is a tough job, there's no question about it. As I said, I'm glad I had the background I did to be able to handle it. So, you know, with that, like I said, I admire the passion of my opponent.
Okay. Now, it's time for our 1-minute closing statement. And earlier we did a coin toss to see who would go first. And it was decided Mr. Day would do his 1-minute closing statement and then Ms. Porrett. So, Mr. Day?
Okay, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our hosts for putting us on tonight. Look, the reality is this. I mean, you can all double check the facts as much as you want, but the fact of the matter is this. We're better off than we were 4 years ago. We were near collapse 4 years ago. I think it's pretty clear to most people in Rockland County that yes, did the legislature and the executive branch work together most of the time? Absolutely. Do we have our dust-ups? For sure. No question about it. But nobody's going to change the direction we're going into without standing up and saying no once in a while. It's a saying, in order to make a good omelet, you got to break a few eggs. That has to happen once in a while. And the things that have occurred are pretty well known now. But what I ask all of you now is this. You've seen the change. You see how Rockland County has changed for the better. I'm looking for one more term in office. I want to complete the mission and complete the job I did. I took this job for my kids, my grandchildren, my family, and all those young boys and girls who I coached over the years. I want to allow me, please, to finish that task. We will get to a place where Rockland County deserves the greatest county in the state of New York. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, I'm glad I said I liked him because he's Irish, because here we go. He didn't reduce the municipal deficit. Our debt is $360 million. We are in fiscal crisis. Our bond rating may have gone up, but that's because we hired a bond rating company that rates higher than Standard & Poor's and Moody's. Our bond rating is lower than most of the towns and villages in our county. Our bond rating is one of the lowest in the state. We have a tone in this county of hatred, rhetoric, anti-Semitism that we have never had before. Now, that may not directly be Mr. Day's fault. I have never heard him specifically say anything along those lines, but he certainly doesn't stand up against all his party members that do. So I am qualified, I am smart, dang right I'm passionate, and I'm ready to be your new county executive. Thanks.